Welcome back, Writing and Schooly gang. I'm here to deliver on the promise that I made for you last week when I did my part 1 of the Schooly tour of my and my wife's Schooly, Penelope. So last week I covered the exterior portion of the tour all the way up to the cockpit or the front part of the bus. This week I'm going to continue with part 2 and finish up the tour of the bus, starting with the living room and working our way back. Katie and I poured our hearts and souls into this bus. So any kind of feedback you have would be awesome and wonderful. Positive, negative, enlightening, inspiring. Leave whatever you feel in the comments. And also consider visiting the link to my website in the description. If you'd like to subscribe to my website, on top of my YouTube channel, I post all kinds of groovy stuff on my website. Everything from business writing, like copywriting, to narrative stuff, ebooks I'm working on, illustrations and quotes from future projects, how-tos from when we did our Schooly conversion, just a whole bunch of stuff to help you and hopefully make you smile. And also check out my ebook, Strand the Silver Radio, on Amazon. I've been running a campaign for a while now. Those of you that follow my blog will have seen this. I'm trying to get to 500 copies sold within a year of release. Currently sitting at 311 copies sold, and I have a little over 3 months left to sell the last 100 and change. So I say sell, but it's actually available for free on Amazon through a special offer right now. So please don't hesitate to visit the link in the description for the book either. It's a dystopian science fiction book full of adventure, romance, and characters that are going to steal your heart and make you fight to get it back. Without further ado, let's commence part 2 of the Schooly tour. Welcome to Lounge Central, also the setting for many of my different skits in my videos. Basically everything you see in this shot, we made ourselves. Let's start with the furniture. Katie hand sewed a lot of these pillowcases. She had to hem all these curtains so they would fit our awkward sized windows. And we also upholstered these cushions ourselves. Let's show you how, because we want to get under there anyway. So this is indoor-outdoor fabric. Under that is 5 inches of foam. Extremely comfortable, keeps its shape. It's nice and firm so you don't sink into it and lose your support. And then on the underside is 1/4 inch birch plywood. So how we made this was we used spray adhesive to attach the foam to the plywood. Then we wrapped this fabric around it and stapled it near the edge. So let's take this away and we can access our storage. So we decided to leave the insides of our furniture unfinished because it's basically like a basement and we're the only ones that are going to see it. Plus, it gives you a really cool glimpse into how we designed and built the furniture. We'll do a top down. Basically what I learned in building this love seat and the couch is that anything constructed from connected I-beams is really sturdy. Now, what do I mean by I-beams? This is an 1.5 inch piece of wood that we custom cut ourselves, and you see a big strip here, and then they're connected on the ends, and then depending on how long they are, you put some in the middle, like an eye. I don't know if there's a real name for this structure, but that's what I'm going to call them. So you can see that this whole box is just a bunch of connected I-beams. And this love seat can hold both Katie and I at the same time. It's very sturdy. This is our wheel well. So this is actually insulation. The outside of the couch, 1/2 inch plywood that's just sanded and painted to look really nice. Down here, you might also notice that there's no finished flooring inside here. This right here is actually the edge of our plywood subfloor. And that's because we chose to build the furniture before we put down the finished floor. This allowed us to hide any unsightly screws attaching the furniture to the floor inside of it. You don't see any screws on the outside of our furniture. It also saved a decent amount of money on costs for flooring. We didn't need as much because we weren't flooring underneath furniture where it was just going to be covered anyway. Honestly, one of the best calls we made. There you go. The couch is built basically the same way inside with a cool second function, which is what these things are for right here. Supporting the fold-out bed. When we have the occasional guest over, they tell us that this is an extremely comfortable bed. We just put a pad over it and wrap it in a sheet. When it's just us, it serves as the most godforsaken area of storage in the bus. I hate when I have to get something from under here, but thankfully that's rare. As you can see, these are really overflow supplies that we have no other place for and we don't need often. More I-beams for a sturdy structure. And here are our very basic end cabinets. Pretty much just plywood walls, a couple support structures like this, but they have some not so simple doors. So this was hand painted by me a couple years ago as an anniversary gift for Katie. Made them into shelves, but we didn't have room for them in the bus. So Katie came up with the idea to use them as closet doors. Some overflow food storage in there. There's also a ton of windows up front for natural light. Oh. We'll get to that later. This foil insulation is related to surviving the winter in a schoolie, which I'm gonna have to make a completely separate video on. But for now, just so you can see what the windows are like, they used to be completely framed with steel, like a regular school bus. We didn't care for that, so we replaced it with some really thin plywood, sanded with sanded white paint, like I showed you earlier. And over here on the sides is inch-thick PVC trim that's siliconed on here. You may be wondering to yourself, what are these little PVC L's for? A simpler time, a better time. Here, let me show you.
Once, long ago, they say it was warm enough outside to leave your windows open. They said it would get so hot some days that you needed them open. Back then, the old ones used to put these screens in to keep bugs out but let the breeze in. Heh, the legends of fools. Now, we know only the chill.
Next, why don't you take a step into my office. This is where the magic happens. This is where I work on my latest books and script all my videos for you guys. Held up by these really cool hinges under here that we bought on Amazon. And they're anchored to the wall and screwed into the underside of the desk. So when I want to collapse it, I just pop these levers here and the whole thing folds down into the wall. So when work time's done for the day, I close up shop and it doesn't take up any extra room. On to the kitchen. One of our favorite areas in the bus. There's so much to see here. It's also one of the most open areas, which is what makes the place feel so big. Seriously, I never get cramped or claustrophobic in here. So I decided this would probably be the best section to talk about some of the features that run the length of the bus. I talked a bit about the floors before, with the stairs. Basically, that's what the whole bus looks like under the laminate. So let's go over a cross section. We've got the steel frame of the bus, which was ridden with rust before we ground it away and sealed it again. On top of that is a grid of furring strips attached directly to the frame with insulation between. Anchored to the furring strips is a layer of plywood subfloor. On top of that is a thin sheet of underlayment. Finally, the laminate floor, sturdy as can be. Now the ceiling. Ah, the ceiling. We really love our cedar ceiling. You can probably tell by how evenly it's spaced that we did the ceiling before we built any separating walls. It was much easier that way, and another great call. So we ripped down the old metal school bus ceiling so we could re-insulate it with rigid foam, not unlike the floor. We jammed as much of it as we could between the steel ribs of the bus frame. Then from one side of the bus to the other, we clicked these tongue-and-groove cedar panels together and anchored them to the ribs of the bus. People tell us it smells really good in here, still as fresh as the day we installed it, but to us it doesn't really smell. It's like anyone's home to them. We decided to leave one of the emergency exits so we could climb up our collapsible ladder to the ceiling. You may have noticed some watermarks on the ceiling. I'm going to talk about this more in my winter schoolie video, but if you're doing wood ceilings for your schoolie, insulate the steel ribs of the bus. If I could go back in time, this would be one of the things I'd do differently about the bus. Probably noticed these corrugated steel pieces too. These run the length of the entire bus, with the exception of where there's walls. These are actually easily removable with just a few screws, wire covers. Behind these are not only the Romex wires for our outlets, but smaller wires for the external bus lights. We had to cut these with a table saw, so there were some sharp edges when we were done. And you'd be amazed how many grown adults will walk into here and the first thing they'll do is go, "Wow," and run their finger along a sharp edge. So to get around that, we added this little plastic coating. No more ouchies. And all that is some gas tubing with a slit in the middle, and it's folded over the sharp edge and siliconed down. And from far away, you really don't even notice a thing. You can also see around this metal trim our lighting. These are string lights, which we plug into the wall to light up when it's dark out. On to our fridge and freezer. We started with a different one that had more fridge, less freezer, but we couldn't fit ice cream in there, so we actually installed this sneaky outlet back here with the fridge in mind so that we wouldn't see the wire. The countertop over it is inch-thick butcher block from Lowe's that we stained ourselves, and it's held up by some decorative dowels here, which are anchored to the floor. It's also supported by this little wooden block here, which is connected to our IKEA cabinets. This brings us to one of the only pieces of furniture in the bus that wasn't designed by us, even if it was assembled by us. This 2-door cabinet and this 3-drawer unit are from IKEA. They're connected by screws here, and they're also mounted to the wall. This is where we have all our food storage. Our garbage and recycling, silverware, and last but not least, under this custom cutting board, is our gas stove. You can see the propane line in the back here that runs up through the floor into the bottom of the stove. That was a pain in the ass to get there, but totally worth it to have propane for cooking. Katie and I were both a little bit on edge at first about having a gas cooktop inside the bus. We wanted to do everything full electric, with an electric cooktop powered by our solar system. Now, once we did a little research, we found out the sheer amount of power it would take to run an electric cooktop every day on top of everything else we power with our solar. So we looked into propane a little bit more. And it doesn't produce any emissions. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. This is a ventless gas stove, as advertised. We always cook with that window open there, but if it's slated on paper to be used without ventilation, how could it be producing any emissions? Moving along, we have some outlets that we installed, and our beautiful tile backsplash, installed and grouted by Katie, along with our designated kitchen container of damp rid. And more on that to come in the Surviving Winter in a Schoolie video. And then, over here, of course, we have our sink, complete with running water, cold and hot. The drainage for the sink goes right down through the shelves, and that's flexible 1.5-inch PVC pipe. You can also see some of the plumbing behind it by the unfinished wall back there. That plumbing runs in from over this way inside of our pallet wall. This wall is made completely from reclaimed wood. We just drove around the neighborhoods looking for discarded pallets that companies were throwing out anyway. That's right, 100% recycled. It already had that weathered look we were going for, and it was free. All we did was sand it, cut it, and screw it up. As you can see, this wall has a bit of a thicker frame. It's about 3-inch wood that we use to frame it out. And then on the skin on this side is pallet wood, and on this side is thinner plywood. And we chose to frame this wall with such thick wood so that we would have room to run 1/2-inch PEX plumbing pipe inside the frame. So we had to drill holes in the frame and then run the PEX through it. So, on the other side of the kitchen is our stove area. As you can see, there's a raging fire going inside right now because it is pretty cold today. It's about 16 degrees when we woke up. But this thing does keep it warm in here. Everything you see here is custom built. The wood storage box was built from leftover plywood, and Katie tiled the top of it. And when we were doing the walls of the bus, we actually put in furring strips similar to the floor in the walls so that we could mount the stove to them through it. So behind the stove directly, and this fan is heat powered, so as heat rises into the metal underside of the fan, it starts to spin and it spreads the hot air around. Behind the stove is this heat shield, and then these handmade tiles. Now these are just clay. Katie and I bought clay blocks, cut them into squares, we rolled that pattern into them ourselves, and we baked them dry and siliconed them up in the amazing pattern that you see. We take a lot of pride in that wall. Also, Holly's paw print. So here's the flue pipe that you saw from outside. You saw the exhaust part of it. It runs up into the ceiling. This is just a copper plate. It gets pretty warm. You know, if you go closer, it's hotter, but not too bad. And under that is fire block insulation like you would use for the inside of a pizza oven. And that pipe runs right through to the outside of the bus. Now, we tried several different types of insulation before we arrived at the fire block. Go straight for that if you're going to install a wood stove. Everything else we tried before that was a little bit too weak, and it either smelled really bad when the stove got raging, or it even melted. So we had to replace the insulation several times. But the fire block and the copper plate do the trick. Over here, you'll see our electric area. Now, we did a ton of our own research, and we also had a licensed electrician help us with this before we started wiring anything. He drew up a diagram and we put it together. So this is everything we need to run electricity. We'll start from the top. Here is where the wires from our solar arrays come down through a connector box, which protects us from the rain. And they run down here into an item called a charge controller. And that just makes sure the system doesn't get overwhelmed with too high voltage or too much power at once. And then we go from there down. It can be a little hard to see inside here, but these are our 6-volt batteries. And basically they're wired in both series and parallel, so they function like two 6-volt batteries that are wired together into one big 12-volt system. And those really thick wires carry all the power from these batteries up through the top of the box into the side of our inverter. And basically the job of an inverter is actually just to invert the electricity from 12 volt, which is what's inside the batteries, into 120 or 110 volt, which is what you find in a regular house outlet. Now, to show you what we have under here, here's our sub panel. It functions like a breaker box that you'd have in a house. So there's our Romex running from the inverter up into the sub panel. From there, it hits breakers, which take it everywhere that we need it, behind those wire covers, to all our outlets. There's also a secondary Romex wire that goes into the inverter from outside, which allows us to plug into shore power from that outlet I showed you outside earlier. And from electricity, we move this way to the throne room. That's right, we sit in style. So this toilet is foot pump activated. You can hear the flushing action there, and all the waste goes right down into the black tank. But where does that water come from, you ask? That would be this nifty crank right here. And this thing is actually a backpack weed killer sprayer. So you grab this, pump it to build up pressure of the water inside the tank, and then when you're ready, press the pedal, and you've got flushing action. And this system is rigged up with a hose that would normally attach to the wand to spray the weed killer. We just used a couple special fittings to attach it behind the toilet. We've got some storage baskets here on a pegboard, a vanity we got from a yard sale, along with our fold-out mirror so that I can say hello to you through the other side of the camera lens. That's what I used to groom my luscious locks in the morning. Over here on the opposite side is the shower room. It's a little tricky to get it to show up on camera really well because it gets pretty dark in there. And to see when we're showering, we circumvent that by opening the skylight here and the window here. So it's actually a lot brighter in there to the naked eye than it appears on a camera. But the shower basin itself is a horse trough, only used by us, however. And the only thing holding it to the floor, besides the pipe that runs from the drain down into the gray tank, are these two blocks on the floor here, which are screwed down just to help it from sliding around, which we've never had a problem with. It's really stuck in there. We have a regular shower head here, and back here, it's our hot water heater. Now that's our PEX piping coming up into the bottom there. That line back there, that's the same color as the wall, is the PEX that brings the water, the cold water in, either from our hose or our fresh water tank, comes over this way, and brings it into the bottom of the hot water heater. That brass line there is the propane line coming up from the floor there, which goes into the hot water heater to make the pilot light that heats the water. Just like a regular shower. See the hot water heater on there, and that's how we clean up. Now the ceiling in the bathroom is actually sealed with 2 layers of marine coating, and we did it that way just to prevent humidity from damaging the ceiling above where we shower with hot water. And we debated doing that with the whole ceiling to protect it from water, and you'll hear more about that in my winter video when I talk about the watermarks on the rest of the bus. This is the only area that's not affected by the drastic heat and cold. Even though there's absolutely no splash outside this curtain, these walls we painted with 2 coats of marine paint, so they're extremely water and humidity repellent. Now onto the area that belongs to my many co-stars that you've met if you've seen my other videos. This is what I call the critter corner. All the time, one of the first things people ask us when we tell them that we live in a school bus is, oh my gosh, where do you keep all your clothes? We tell them, we have 3 closets. And they're like, oh. And then we're like, 2 of them are for the animals. So let's start with the biggest side here. This area belongs to the rats. We have 5, which you've met in other videos most likely. Just like that, they all come running. Rats are amazing pets, and don't let anyone else tell you differently. Look at that, kisses whenever I want them. So this is a double Critter Nation cage. So this group is super social, as you can see, and they really just prefer to be played with and taken out, so we take them out twice a day. Up here, under this nifty valance Katie sewed together, is all their storage stuff, fleece to keep them warm and everything. Then over on this other side, we have the rest of our critters, minus the ones that roam the bus. And some memorabilia from our friends that have come and gone. Up here, we have our bugs, and Martin, our salamander, who tends to get grouped in with the bugs. We have 2 hissing cockroaches, a millipede, and Martin the salamander. A little bit down further, we have our mouse cage. And no, they're not just the same as rats. They're a lot more curious, a lot less cuddly. And down here, we have our newest addition to bus life, even though she's one of the pets that's been with us the longest. This is Franklin. And when we first got Franklin, she was the size of a quarter. Now she's a whopping 6 inches long. We were really anxious about bringing her in here because we were worried about the water sloshing, but we custom made this environment so that that wouldn't happen. Not that she ever uses her island. This compartment is also tiled in just in case any water does splash out, but it really doesn't happen. And moving back to our room, first we're gonna look up to the shining bane of my video making existence. Yes, folks, this is the skylight. The blinding white radiance that is the reason why so many of my videos have awkward lighting. Even with this UV filter on the screen, this thing can really make or break my video depending on the lighting for the day. And there's not much I can do about it because we have string lights back here, but they really don't take well to the camera. So, here's our room. Here's our third closet, which has our hanging clothes stashed away. And a couple of other really neat features. One being the hand-painted mural you see here. Katie and I painted that ourselves. Here's our bed, pretty standard. It sits on a very sturdy bed frame that we built ourselves. And you'll see in here, we have a ton of storage, which is absolutely filled to the brim right now. And this structure here, you'll recognize is one of those I-beam type things I was telling you about earlier. And that's pretty much what the whole bed is made of, is just like a box of I-beams, just like the furniture up front, but with a couple extra supports going through the middle. And you'll see that wooden wall in the back separates it from the compartment I showed you earlier that you can only access from outside. That's how the bed is structured. And our end cabinet here, built from leftover scrap next to our laundry. This holds all of my extra gaming supplies. So all my consoles I'm not using constantly, an extra TV in case Katie wants to watch something while I'm playing video games. And last but not least, the Rat Jungle Gym. That's right, we used leftover supplies to make platforms, bridges, anything the rats could possibly want to entertain themselves. And they do. They absolutely love climbing all over this stuff. Allow me to demonstrate. There you have it, everybody. Penelope. Now, back to our studio. Whew, a long one, I know, but also long overdue. I've wanted to give you guys a tour of our home for a long time now. So has Holly. It's plain to see that Katie and I poured our heart and soul into everything we did here, so I'm really eager to hear what you guys think about the place. It's also the set of all my videos, so get used to it. I really hope this video helps you too, if you're curious or even in the beginning stages of converting a schoolie yourself. I hope that seeing how we did some things gives you ideas and inspiration. And if you have questions about anything we did, I promise to answer to the best of my ability. Please shoot me a message in the comments below or connect with me on my website, which is just www.justinaddis.com. I'll leave a link for it in the description. But there's a whole bunch of blogging knowledge available to you there because I sort of blogged along as we built the schoolie, so that's a resource for you there. Because of our living situation, when Katie got this awesome job in Virginia, we were able to completely uproot our lives on Long Island and just drive here. So you can see the benefits of schoolie life. If you like this video, make sure to click subscribe and hit the bell icon to support more fun writing help and schoolie/travel YouTube videos. As far as future schoolie videos, I plan on doing one about surviving the winter in a schoolie and also what it's like cohabitating with 17 animals in a schoolie. If you have any other ideas you think I should do for a schoolie or writing video, leave them in the comments or shoot me a message. Roadside Writer, out.